DeFi by Design, where we talk all things blockchain and cryptocurrency while striving to educate, empower, and enrich.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to DeFi by Design, episode 113. Get ready to get modular pilled because there's nothing else on the agenda because we're going to Istanbul, and I'm feeling Istanbulish. I got my More Layers shirt on. Are you kidding me? We're scaling, Rob. More layers, please. How you doing, Rob?
Andy's joking with me because I posted a tweet yesterday that said layers don't exist anymore because we're in modular world now. And this is no longer layer 1, layer 2, layer N blockchain space. We're now in this world where modules of blockchains just exist in space. And we're going to the moon of scalability. We're definitely scaling. Comes with trade-offs with interoperability. So I'm definitely curious to hear more about how Injective handles those trade-offs. I'm just gonna sit back and learn. That's what I enjoy most about these podcasts. And Eric, I'm gonna pass it over to you to just kind of introduce yourself, how you're feeling. You really need no introduction. We've all seen Injective on the top 50 of CoinMarketCap, so kind of speaks for itself nowadays. But we won't speak too much about the price and the token. We are really here to learn more about the technology and the contributions you're making to the blockchain space. So welcome to the show, and it's a pleasure to have you on.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. My name is Eric Chen. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Injective Labs. So we're like a core contributor to the Injective ecosystem. And so what Injective is basically it's a layer 1 blockchain that focuses on financial applications. It has a lot of modules that allows developers to plug and play and synergize with each other. Like the Rollup module that supports spot and derivatives exchanges, Oracle modules, etc. And Injective itself is fairly scalable with roughly 20,000 TPS, if that stat even matters these days. And also have done very very tremendous amount of growth for the past year or so with Helix clocking in I think 13 or 14 billion dollar volume to date, and also more than 300 or 400 transactions, to date.
Yeah, and that's very, very great accomplishments thus far, and I'm sure that you're proud of yourself, but also looking at your roadmap, like, damn, we have a lot of work to do. And just to kind of rewind a little bit, Rob and I were actually part of the University of Florida Blockchain Club, and when we were getting ready for this podcast, we saw that you were pretty involved with the NYU Blockchain Labs. And we're kind of like, doing some risk management assessments at various funds and things. And I'm just curious, like how you went from like, okay, I'm going to work, in different funds and kind of do like kind of quant things. Okay, getting like the university education angle, and then now we're here in Injective. It's quite an interesting path.
Yeah, so I think my student club days back in the day was mainly focusing on like research and stuff like that. I don't think the space was like mature enough for algorithmic trading or like quant trading. I remember back in the day the real automated strategy that everyone participated in was really like the compute premium. So I think back then most of the mind share and most of the participation from space are generally on the research direction and a lot more heavily on the cryptography side. These days unfortunately given how mature the space is relative to what it was like 2018 or 2019, certainly cryptography has been kind of like the on the sidelines, behind the curtains, and it has already provided and realized so much of the infrastructure that we use and enjoy today.
Yeah, super cool. Appreciate that. Yeah, Rob and I had a similar experience with the while albeit probably less technical and less in-depth, we were quite young at the time, 17, 16, 18, something like that. We were kind of doing this education angle on in the club, and that led to just a whole different, insights into the space and just what's possible. And now there's tons of college DAOs and, there's Berkeley and UWish and et cetera participating in optimism governance and Aave governance and some interesting things happening at the college level, but we won't dive too deep into that. But I'd like to go to the library and open up your mind a little bit as to where the role of the VM has started to play in your kind of journey with Injective. You guys are currently using SVM, which I think our audience is probably pretty new to, and the community is as a whole, because it's quite a bit of a new development, and also EVM. So obviously compatible with kind of both. So yeah, I guess let's just start at the foundational level and then kind of dive deeper and deeper. But how are these pieces put together? With these different VMs, and where does Injective fit? And then I think we can dive further.
Yeah, so all these recent launches around like Cascade, which is the SVM rollup, and also like INEVM, which is like EVM rollup, are all part of this initiative that's called like electron chains. And this means that it's a alternative environment or rollup layer, or a network that connects or is secured by Injective in some way, whether Injective servicing as like the verifier, DA layer, etc. And these rollups are kind of like these specialized environments, or kind of like distinct and separate environments from what's typically offered within the Injective core chain, and acting as kind of like these surrounding like electrons that kind of like provide a lot more utility, provide a lot more like scale, and also provide a lot more interesting use cases for the overall Injective ecosystem. And I think what's interesting about Injective's role in this, and why we at Injective Labs decided to pursue this direction of adding on more rollup layers, and pursuing a more like pathway towards a modular approach, is that basically Injective as a chain itself is a fairly specialized environment, and has kind of like a kind of peculiar like smart contract environment called Cosmosm, which is currently primarily Rust based. It isn't really like full on like transpilable from EVM or like SVM. And it's a bit of a work to get used to it, and create like scalable and interesting applications from it. And now on top of that, there's all these like highly efficient and optimized modules, like exchange module that can support a lot of trades for every single block, being able to match them efficiently in like a single like aggregated way. And you're going to see a lot of these dApps within the Cosmosm layer also jamming in orders, creating different types of like on-chain liquidity kind of like protocols, or creating different types of financial products or protocols to support and synergize with this. And this basically means that there's going to be like a huge amount of traffic coming through into like the exchange module. And first of all, on like the developer friendliness side, these type of role environments kind of serve as this, I would say, like more like a high level, like a onboarding environment for different types of developers. Are like, hey, like I'm not super familiar with Cosmos, and I'm certainly not familiar with Rust, but hey, here's like a EVM role environment where I can get used to. Now, if you look at it from like the most abstract low level way, it just feels like a alternative environment with different precompiles. But in reality, from like a high level developer perspective, it's like, hey, like this is something I can get started with a lower risk. And then it's the same case for like SVM, which is another set of kind of like an environment that has very, very interesting properties, distinct from like the EVM layer, that is actually a little bit more aligned with like the Injective network's offering, given that it's more I would say relatively computation heavy, and storage. Obviously, Injective is a little bit more focused on the space aspect of things by supporting like a large order book, etc. But I think like that's also where you're going to find like the most amount of HFT or kind of like advanced developers are working on very, very cutting edge financial applications and stuff like that. And all these role environments with different types of like security properties, different types of interoperability properties, and more importantly, different types of scalability properties, allow for these type of developers to deploy the application in the easiest way possible, and I think more importantly in a secure way, because they're familiar with Solidity, or they're familiar with SVM, and interop and kind of compose with all the existing applications within the Injective chain itself. So right now, obviously, Injective doesn't really need or isn't really hitting the scalability bottleneck. But later on, it's going to transition from an onboarding tool into more of a, how do I call it, like a scaling layer.
Got it. And you're tying in so many of the components that we've seen exist in the space. So you mentioned SVM. Andy's an SVM maxi today. That's obviously the Solana virtual machine. And then you also mentioned that it's EVM compatible and that you're leveraging CosmWasm, which is inherently a Cosmos infrastructure piece. So I'm curious, what is special about Injective that pulls all these technologies together?
Yeah, so I think that's both the unique situation that Injective's electron layers are facing, essentially these sort of challenges and also like unique offerings, is that typically when you look at like a Rollup or like a modular kit, unless it's very much an application specific layer, it's typically served as like a scaling layer. In the case of like Optimism, in the case of like Arbitrum, in the case of Base, they're pretty much identical environments with different parameters, different like kind of like trade-offs in terms of security when it comes to interoperability. But at the end of the day, it's meant to scale the layer. But for Injective's case, it's a slightly different problem. Like scalability isn't necessarily like a problem for Injective just yet. It's going to take a while before that becomes a problem. The real problem is interoperability between these very, very distinct environments and figuring out a way to like unify and pass messages, secure messages, because token transfer, atomic swap, etc. are all just messages at the end of the day. And then like making sure that all these applications can compose with each other in the most natural way. And so through these rollups, it's almost like a kind of like a battle testing of building these interoperability suites, building all these kind of like a base layer tools that developers can leverage to make sure that like their Solidity contract can send very direct instructions into CosmWasm contracts, or their Solana programs can create very, very high frequency signals towards orders on top of Injective. And basically, like it's a slightly different direction with like a slightly different focus where we worry less about the scaling aspect of things. Basically, Injective's 1-ish second block time kind of alleviates a lot of the concern around like challenge period and the size of block space also allows for it. But I think CosmWasm also had a bunch of like added benefits from it. But at the same time, it's like, hey, like this is a completely different language, it's a completely different environment. If you go down to the bytecode, it's like pretty much the same, but like, how do you make this developer layer, which effectively speaking, it's like almost like a UX, but like DevX layer, much more efficient, much more usable. And this kind of will imply, eventually like a very, very much seamless, frictionless, borderless, multi-chain experience where users might not even realize they're going from like Injective to Solana to Ethereum to whatever layer, or from like Arbitrum to Solana, or like a Solana rollup solution, using the same set of keys by probably like account abstraction or something like that, and hopping between 5 applications in the process. But from user end, it's just like, oh, like after 5 seconds, like my transaction is all said and done, and I subscribe into a pool or something like that.
You've shed a very clear light on the trade-offs in the design space for modular blockchains. It's something that we've heard time and time again, that these modular designs allow for this great scalability, but at the trade-off of interop. And it's something that I think we've kind of seen this like Cambrian explosion of chains that have launched in the modular space, and they're leading to an increase in the amount of block space and the amount of like throughput that we can push through some of these networks. But again, it's further fragmentation. And then you guys are now building the interoperability suites. I think that's a really cool term for it too, because it's almost like these like pieces of infrastructure that pull together those fragmentations and kind of make sense of those modular chains. So I'm curious, like, kind of looking at this lens, this modularity lens, where you can now interop across these different modular apps. I'm curious how this may change something that we've spoke about, and I hope you're familiar with, which is the Fat Application Thesis and the Fat Protocol Thesis. I'm curious if you've heard about this, if you have, like, your thoughts, and how do you think the modular landscape changes the Fat Protocol Thesis, and where value flows to the top of the stack, the bottom of the stack? It's like layers no longer exist. So, like, where does value flow in this modular landscape?
So for the longest time, I've been kind of like not heavily subscribed to the Fat Protocol Thesis. Because I remember when it came out, when it was like a kind of like hotly discussed topic in like 2018 or 2019, where, this is a new paradigm, and like, it's a Fat Protocol and stuff like that. And like, application doesn't like accrue the most value, the underlying protocol do. I think it's just the same phenomenon as like a nascent industry where like infrastructure first and then application. Because if you look at like, the internet era, like .com to, what it is today, which is primarily like, a bunch of social media apps or something like that, that are, driving in terms of market value. There are like obviously like exceptions in a sense, but the point being that like back in the day, primarily like those who achieve very, very high valuation and those who have, like who garner like the most activity are server farms, infrastructure providers, all those like, TMT, companies. And then, now it's primarily like application sided, like, that's infrastructure side has matured a lot, and the valuation driver is, mainly resting on application. So right now we're also kind of seeing like a transition from Fat Protocol to Fat Application. You don't see as many, like Ethereum killer out there. You don't see that many, chains trying to be their own like standalone ecosystem and infrastructure with their own wallet solutions and stuff like that. What you do see is a lot of successful applications getting a lot of user interest, driving like a lot more, user-focused adoption, rather than saying that we're building an infrastructure for applications that's going to get us a lot of user. And for Injective's case, that was a kind of like baked in pretty much since day one, where it's like, for a lot of the applications on top of Injective, they get this very interesting benefit of connecting with MetaMask wallet via, basically just signing a message from the Ethereum, mainnet, and that becomes a valid transaction on top of Injective after relay, and there's not even like gas fees, where basically the gas fees fronted by the applications themselves, so users don't have to pay for it. And also, like all the using the same signature scheme. So on the surface level, it means that the user using like a application on top of Injective, if the developer chooses, the user will never realize that they're using an application on top of Injective. For them, it's just like, oh, I deposit, which is a bridging process, and then it becomes like a balance on this platform. And then I can just do whatever transaction I want, primarily let's say like trading and stuff like that, and I can just withdraw, which is bridging it out or bridging it back to source chain, and then call it a day. But in reality, in the back end, your application paying for the gas fee for the user, the relaying like the sign message from sign head data from like Ethereum mainnet to Injective, and they're supporting the entire infrastructure along the way. So yeah, I think Fat Application is going to be like kind of like a canonical term pretty soon-ish, and it's going to be interesting to see, because I think that's really where the excitement is. And also, interestingly enough, Injective as this ecosystem really started like kind of application tokens, right? Where it's really just one single application that was presented to the general user. As even though the infrastructure is like pretty generalized, you can support a bunch of other things and stuff like that. But initially, it interfaced the users with like a sample application, basically, as the Injective exchange. And this is, users treat, Injective as an ecosystem initially as an application. And there are many reasons why, us at Injective Labs, approach Injective Exchange that way. But I think, starting off as application focused, building like an infrastructure that are friendly to application developers rather than, accruing value to the underlying protocol itself is first of all a significant advantage in growth against, other, generalized environments. But more importantly, it's to, understand, the needs and wants of a developer in the most intimate way possible. And I think the modular stack these days, it's another step towards, empowering application, right? Because historically, one of the biggest problems for, modular architecture is the symmetrical security amongst, different layers, and more importantly, the data passing between them. And coincidentally, that's basically been like the whole thing that Cosmos was trying to address themselves. And, they present a very, very elegant solution that was IBC. And it's, very, very scalable from like an infrastructure maintenance level. And it's also, permissionless in terms of adding new layer. And most importantly, it's, almost like a la carte style where if you trust this, like a bidirectional chain to basically this destination you're going to, then, you can trust this bridge that goes between them because it's practically speaking secure by the bridge themselves. So it's secure by the chain themselves. So that actually, using that, it actually solves a lot of interoperability blockers that enables like a modular layer. And, like a lot of the toolkits and suites that we adopt for, interoperability, oftentimes are also powered by IBC, right? And, a lot of our work that we're trying to do is to create kind of this interface that allows for, Ethereum contracts to, create and, transmit like IBC compatible messages, and now, more like ICA, compatible messages to basically go through this, highway, a secure highway of message passing where we don't have to worry about too many things per se. And not saying that's the easiest, but it's, it's one of the biggest, kind of like a step up in terms of building these interoperability solutions.
Yeah, I mean, to put this into perspective, we had the Fat Protocol thesis with kind of like Ethereum and these ideas where like these underlying layers would accrue a bunch of value. That was almost before we had DeFi and a bunch of like popular apps. And then now I think to your point, when you think of popular apps, you think of social media applications, you think of applications on your phone, you think of different things that you use on the internet, and those are, you don't really think of the HTTPS or the email server or the technology layer under it. While that layer is definitely accruing value in the sense what the consumer and where all the economic activity is happening is within that app. Obviously, if it's in a certain network, that network thus can kind of show statistics or things and say, hey, this is all the activity that we have. But from a perspective of like investing, I think of a perspective of onboarding, I think it's definitely a matter of the apps. And then furthermore, kind of on your point about where Injective lies in the overall ecosystem of interop. I mean, there's some really, really good points there. And one specific that you made was regards to Ethereum as well, and kind of like this idea of being a settlement layer, alongside Injective. So could you please walk us through what a modular stack using Injective either currently looks like or could look like? So, okay, Injective's this L1, it's the settlement layer, if I'm not mistaken. Then there's different, you can have different VMs, different rollups, data availability. Are all these compatible in the sense of like the big players in the game now? What is the current stack, if there is one now, and then, or what could one look like separating from a monolithic chain to a modular? Or does Injective just do all this itself?
Yeah, I think that's, like starting off, kind of like almost like up to the Rollup developer. In a sense, like Injective block space isn't that expensive compared to like Ethereum, etc. So oftentimes, like we see like Injectives not only serving as a settlement slash verifier setup, but also like the DA layer, because like posting all the proofs and the synchronization isn't too cost prohibitive. And currently I believe like IMVM is doing that. But later on, it's a very, very like hands off slash like natural dynamics where it's like let's say the cost of block space within Injective goes up a lot more. And submitting these proofs becomes more expensive, and like the rollup stack can easily migrate to like a DA layer that's like off chain essentially. Then it's up to the developer themselves to try to like move it off. So I think the advantage of building like a rollup layer where scalability isn't like the primary objective here per se. But rather, offering more features and tool set and expanding the offering, is that, you don't have to have any like difficult problems to heavily optimize for, and instead you focus on the experience. Because oftentimes, let's say, there are 10, very, very talented engineers working on a specific rollup solution for EVM, et cetera. The time allocation could be like 20/80 between, 20% on building up like out of the box, tool suites and, contracts where developers can utilize. So, interop and, building dispersed solutions, or like atomic swap solutions, so that, it's not just message passing, but also, like the end-to-end solution of it. But the 80% is, figuring out like a economically sensible, like a secure and, highly scalable layer, that doesn't have, liveness or correctness issues, et cetera. And currently, like the majority of a lot of these rollup layers, trying to build these rollups on top of Ethereum has been, mainly competitive on that side on like how do we, make sure like the challenge period for, let's say, like optimism is as short as possible, or how do we build solutions to like, navigate that, and like, or like, like how do we lower like the cost of maintaining like a ZK rollup or something like that. And yeah, like obviously Celestia and other like modular architecture also gets to focus on user experience. We already started off with, let's say, like this highly modular, symmetrical and secure layer where it's basically separating all of these like components within the blockchain itself, and allowing a certain like environment and layer to like specialize on those single thing, let's say DA, etc. And at the same time, keeping them like so closely synced to a degree of almost like atomic. Then you can like worry about like how to make the developer experience seamless. How do you get all these linkages and stuff like that? And yeah, like I think that is one of the greatest things about the modular stack is that when you don't have to initially consider like all the scalability issues and all the economic factors of it, you free up a lot of times to build a truly, like a user-friendly, developer-friendly application.
Yeah, 2 fun facts there. Did you guys know that there's not been a fraud proof yet on any optimistic rollups because there's essential.
That's the exact
Yeah, and there is highly unlikely for a centralized sequencer to be able to commit any malicious action or really be incentivized to. And then the other one is that 7-day optimistic fraud proof window was actually an arbitrary time. It was just, yeah, it sounds good. And like you said, Eric, there's been some proposals, I think from Steven Goldfelder or from one of the Arbitrum guys from Off-Chain Labs, who's starting to push on trying to lower that, which I think is super interesting. And
well, it's not like super arbitrary per se, like, between like, let's say like 5 and like 9 days, 7 days, probably just pretty arbitrary. But like you do have like a minimum where like the challenge period needs to like the challenge process, for some it's interactive, for some it's not interactive, needs to fully play out. And that's depending on, the block space plus like a little bit of leeway because you need it in other transactions as well. So to make it happen. So yeah, like the debate around, lowering the challenge period, et cetera. I mean, like at the end of the day, fraud proof is permissioned.
Yeah,
you can make the challenge period pretty much just like one block. But like, like in the case of like lowering it and opening up, like it's it's better for them to wait for trial proof to be fully live and battle tested with malicious actors, well funded, before you lower that.
Definitely. So to kind of switch gears back to the Injective side, I mean, from my perspective, it seems like you guys can handle the DA layer because the call data storage is effectively not very expensive right now when compared to something like Ethereum. You guys can use VMs, other VMs, Solana, EVM, Cartesi VM, Move VM, name your VM here. And then teams can come in and build on top different rollups to using Injective as a settlement layer and also as a DA layer, as you said, as long as the costs don't become too prohibitive. Now, specifically on the DA layer side, as how Injective handles it, we don't have to get too technical, but I just want to understand the trade-off that you guys make, if we haven't already established it, but on the basically gas per byte situation and the on-chain and off-chain storage. So do you guys have an off-chain data storage committee secured by the Injective nodes? Or do you guys store these data off-chains in something like a Validium or like some other mechanism? And then if you can draw like I saw this graph of Celestia had like this x-axis of gas per byte and y-axis of decentralization. And rollups were like at the very top. Validiums were like at the bottom. And then in the middle was DHC, a data availability committee. And then Celestia was kind of there in the middle. I'm curious where you think that you find yourself in the basically cost and decentralization parameter on your data availability situation, I guess.
Yeah. So basically, the interesting part about Injective, and this is one like nice little added benefit for Injective as a blockchain, as an ecosystem, not being generalized, is that without sounding like a car wash commercial guy, but like it doesn't really need to subscribe to that type of bound. Being like the point being that the Cosmos smart contract environment still subscribes to that, and as a matter of fact, it's pretty similar to any type of standard like smart contract environment like Ethereum, and it might be slightly cheaper, just given that it's WASM based and there are a few parts that are optimized. For example, like token transfer utilizing a module, which doesn't require that many smart contract operations, etc. Other modules, and that's why the out of box plug and play module is so important, is that it has its own customized a gas RAM, where a specific application is kind of deterministic in terms of its computational costs. In Cosmos is basically like a type of message, and this message has kind of like a bound in terms of or like an expected bound in terms of how much operation or the cost of it. And this means that when a developers implement these type of modules and stuff like that, they have a very good guess on the cost of that specific message, the lower upper bound. If they don't have a good guess, they probably need to adjust to that, because that would be kind of a mistake basically. But the point being that that's why for example, creating a trade, posting an order, canceling an order, doesn't really cost much on Injective, and that's why applications can front the gas fee for a user, because it's not expensive to do it. It's just a little bit. It's just that you don't want all the users to go through a hassle of acquiring a native token to pay for gas. And then on the other hand, but Cosmos contracts and transactions, oftentimes, other than a very specific hook to interact with the native modules, all subscribe to the same type of generalized environment, and there's no easy way around it. And if there is, you're still making a very significant trade-off that you probably regret later on and you have to adjust. So yeah, that's why Rollup is has a very, very important strategic position within the Injective ecosystem. Is that Injective as an ecosystem is more specialized, more sector focused, more specific, where you can totally do everything you do on Ethereum on top of the Cosmos layer, but that doesn't have a significant advantage over time. It's not going to get amazingly cheaper unless you sacrifice decentralization. It's not going to have a lot more feature offering per se, especially as Ethereum itself improves, right? But what you're going to get is basically these set of specialized modules that has, like a kind of like almost like a constant scale gas cost, etc. That you can always have a very stable estimation and stable kind of like cost parameters for application developers, for users, and more importantly, because these are built-in modules for within the chain itself, it's almost like a specialized profile where the entire chain and the stakeholders are aligned to basically optimize for it and self-evolve in a way. Like if it can be scaled better, if it can be optimized further, they will try to make these messages more optimized. Whereas if let's say like some specific contract and cost laws because of the the way the gas economy is designed, it's not exactly most friendly for them, and they say that, oh, like this is super unfriendly, like I want to make a change on like how the gas is calculated, then like it's gonna fall on deaf ears. Like it's not really gonna be like prioritized by all the stakeholders as a result, and that's kind of general problem within generalized environments. So yeah, like that's kind of an interesting situation, but that's also why the trade-off here is that you don't you don't have like a generalized focus. You focus on like the financial application part.
Yep. Yeah. So I mean, from that explanation, the only reason for me to understand as to why one of the key reasons would be to use a separate data availability layer like a Celestia or XYZ would be to just add a different piece of the puzzle to the equation or to this a la carte menu. I really like, only you're describing modular, you said that, but I really liked it because it's almost like a plug and play, a pick and choose. Well, what do you want? It's like a 4-course meal. But it would be using an alternative DA layer just in the sake of likely reducing single point of failure and just expanding decentralization, as well as onboarding that community of potential users or fans or marketing, et cetera, in there, which is definitely interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think we can get out of the weeds here and kind of go more to where you guys are working on. I just had one last thing about the VMs. Is Solana VM powerful because it allows, as we know, Rust to build dApps within other ecosystems, or is there a technological reason as to why you guys are bullish on SVM and why you are so keen on kind of getting it into Injective?
Yeah, so I think Solana VM is powerful in the sense of like at the end of the day, like everything converges and everything equalizes, right? There's nothing that EVM can like there's nothing like just fundamentally better for EVM or like SVM. It's just that like they're just taking a trade-off at the end of the day. Now there could be like some optimization or some improvement that can make it marginally better, but there's no like fundamental advantage. But what's fundamental about like the SVM layer is that it between like kind of like the space and computation slider, they picked very much to the like bias towards computation, and this brings a lot of added benefits, etc. Because as long as you manage your storage, aka like space correctly, these applications will have a fundamental like advantage over like EVM applications, and this basically means that for obviously for EVM's case, they're designed to be highly generalized. They try to like take the mean or like the middle ground between every single like consideration and trade-off. And as a result, you make a certain like vertical of application kind of unhappy. And for Solana case, the reason why like initially it had a lot of kind of passion or a lot of adoption amongst like HFT developers, building their DeFi applications, or a lot of DeFi protocols, is that they just allow for a lot more computation to go through like a reasonable cost, especially with the parallelization aspect of things across like different types of trade-offs that they don't necessarily need to worry about. And like brought like a whole new sector of like DeFi applications that totally would have been like economically like inviable on top of Ethereum, unless you built like a customized Rollup, which loses composability. And so by picking and choosing crossing the trade-off spectrum SVM, kind of created this room for like a lot more like opportunities and like a lot more like kind of like a sector of application to really thrive. And I think interestingly now it's also like NFT, which people have been like very passionate about. It's also kind of ridiculous how like minting an NFT costs like so much during the heydays on Ethereum.
Hundreds of dollars in gas, thousands. So if I was to build the fastest modular stack, would I build Injective as my settlement layer and my DA layer, SVM as my VM, and then build atop that stack?
Yeah, if you want to build a layer that's financially focused,
Computational, like HFT speed.
If you're building something financial related, it's certainly like Injective is the best fit. Obviously, if you're building something that doesn't necessarily have to do much with like the core dApps on top of Injective or the modules, it'll equalize eventually. Even though we are at an advantage in terms of like speed and also like block space, and that's because we have a sector focus, right? If you like try to apply something general, like it's always going to be like a musical chair of chains where it's like, oh, Ethereum is too expensive, let's go to BSC. BSC is too expensive, let's go to like somewhere else, right? So I think that part it doesn't have like a long-term kind of like moat around like your advantage where like, oh, like there's like you only do it on top of Injective if you're building something that's like non-financial related. But if you are building something that's whether it be like a DeFi protocol or something more institutional, etc., like you thereby have a moat where like there's literally a lot of things that you can't find or would be economically inviable on other chains.
I got a quick question. Like aside from so the VM narrative, you guys are all over in the execution space with the Solana VM. Thinking about Injective from the settlement perspective, I'm curious. Like, do you guys, given that you host your settlement layer that settles execution from these VMs, do you have proposer builder separation and collect MEV? Is that something that you guys do at the chain level or the settlement level?
Oh, so that is a bit under the works with collaboration with Skip. On that aspect of things, it becomes kind of like an interesting question because it also depends on like the amount of voting power that are subscribed to that type of P2P network. If it's like a low amount, it almost has like a threshold where it's like after a certain threshold, that basically almost becomes like canonical and the standard expectations of it. So I would say like the current answer is that just like there's no way to tell kind of preemptively because it's an interesting dynamic because on one side, like the majority of transactions on top of Injectives are, orders and trades. And inherently there's little to no, like value in, having MVV protection on these trading. And that's just for context here, that's because Exchange module uses frequent batch option to remove any type of front running or, MEV issues. And so that kind of, makes it so that, validators have somewhat of a partial incentive to, like subscribe into this protocol. But at the same time, it depends on how fast they pick it up, et cetera. So that is kind of like a, we'll see type of situation. But I'm overall like very, very excited about like what Skip is working on because there are far more, type of applications, and we already bring some of them a lot, like for example, like liquidation, auctioning, et cetera, that can be like super useful to their mechanism. But yeah, like it really depends on how that ecosystem plays out.
Yeah, it's fun relative to the Fat protocol thesis too, because it was almost like a value musical chairs there for a while, like especially in times of the bull. The applications were collecting so much in trading fees, and then they had to pay so much in gas and the blockchains and the settlement layers, ended up collecting all of that MEV. And it was almost like the trading fees were just getting shipped right over to the chain. So yeah, again, I think the modularity landscape just breaks this Fat protocol thesis, and we're starting to see a lot more reason for the Fat application thesis.
Yeah, it literally changed the landscape of, kind of like an application blockchain, like, like a musical chair where like you just keep moving lower and lower within the cost spectrum amongst like fairly identical like contract environments, and then flipping the game on its head, where it's like now it's like full on customizable, and it really would compress the cost of applications trying to build, or cost of users interacting with the application. But more importantly, it creates kind of like this bottom line where it's like, no matter like how empty your block space is on like like a certain like L1 or EVM, like you're still not going to be as cheap or as as optimized or efficient frontier of the utility function as like a modular stack.
Yeah, I try to get out of the weeds, but the weeds just keep pulling me in. I'm curious furthermore on this kind of idea here. We didn't touch too much on like app specific versus generalized. We got a couple of minutes. So I just want to pose the question that we had on the panel in Nebular to you: L1 Cosmos app chains or rollups?
Yeah, I obviously am quite biased on that answer, but I think like one misconception people have about app chains, and it also could be the case, or this is like mainly my opinion, and it's certainly not necessarily agreed by a lot of other folks building like chains within Cosmos, or like subscribe fully to like that app chain definition. But I think the notion of app chain might be a little bit misguided, given that like it's almost like an evolutionary stage, where you start off as you start off searching for like environments or implementations that can satisfy your product offering and your application. So I can't build this contract on Ethereum, or like this is impractical, economically inviable to build this on Ethereum. And it makes a significant difference for this application to be its own like decentralized network, to be its own chain. And it makes sense for me. And the value is so high that I lose all the ethnicity, the composability, the adjacency, suffer like face like the risk, and more importantly, deal with like kind of like a cold start problem of like a 0 to 1 of infrastructure and like all the surrounding tool stack. But like it's worth it for me to like pursue that direction. Then it makes sense for you to be like an app chain. And oftentimes, the next step for that is that this is by being like a network, by being like a chain, you are no longer like an app chain, because you don't have to be the only app. You can be like a castle / vault style management, where like there's like one big application, and there's a lot of surrounding applications, smaller arguably, that service value to it, synergize with it, etc. But you're really just like a sector specific chain, or like a vertical focus chain. So I think that's the last stage of evolution. Is oftentimes like I know a lot of people are working towards it, but oftentimes people kind of stop at hey, like you are a application, but have that to be a chain, but don't really think much after like the next stage of evolution. And oftentimes there's also like challenges where it's like, yeah, let's just build a chain, and not thinking about like the real advantage of it over like just being like an application with so much adjacency, so much discovery. We certainly during the early days underestimated how much work there is. Even after we try to make everything as Ethereum centric and Ethereum friendly as possible, to make sure that we take advantage of the existing mind chain within Ethereum. But we also underestimated just like how much like stuff that we lose out on. Like it's almost it's highly costly to like keep track of a lot of stats in public Injective by like public explorers like DeFi Llama, etc., because they simply can't decipher like the stats, and then to this day it's like still out of date, and arguably incorrect. And then like there's still a lot of other places where they built it to be Ethereum because they assume the whole ecosystem is Ethereum. So you lose out on all those application suite, or you have an increased cost of being included in those application suites. So it's tough, man. Like, being an app chain, it's not like, just building an app and then, you just want to be a chain. It's like, you've considered a multitude of options, and then it's a final, plan where, hey, like there's no available option that makes sense based on, my needs and wants. And, I gotta, do the hard work and build like a chain around it. And then my the pros behind that is that, I become a bigger ecosystem than just application. I create this infrastructure where a lot of other applications can thereby flourish.
Yeah, I mean, to kind of wrap this up here, the infrastructure dilemma is one where, you have to make that, you have to make that choice. Like, is the infrastructure, is it deployable from a dev and a financial cost perspective? Is my application specific? Is there a specialized need for this execution environment? Right. So those are kind of like the two biggest points that you made in detail there, right? And just kind of putting those into perspective for a dev or a builder or a CEO. Those are the important questions. And then I think there's other builders that can sympathize with the understanding of trying to build away from Ethereum or not use the infra that currently exists. I know, just for example, even two examples. One is just the reason why these VMs are so popular and these alternative VMs have grown in size and in mind shares because, there's an entire code library for the last 20 years on some of these VMs that EVM just doesn't have. There's tons of different tools and infrastructures that you can just kind of more so plug and play. And then even further, I read this article from Neil from Eclipse, who's also on this panel, and they started Eclipse thinking about trying to build app-specific rollups only. They were trying to build to scale 10,000 rollups. After several months of realizing how much damn work it is to build individual execution environments time and time again, they decided, well, this isn't for us. The 10,000 rollup future, it may or may not happen, but we're not going to really kind of build a part of it, or they're going to focus in a different light, right? And kind of go towards a more general purpose environment. And just to kind of wrap up, we are the Rollup, so I think that we can agree with your perspective. But I appreciate what happens in the Cosmos ecosystem, and I think I'm a little bit biased towards Ethereum in a sense. But I think that next to Ethereum is Cosmos with their devs, their builders, their kind of technology, and their overall the whole IBC and the level of just innovation there is always cool to see at these different conferences and what they come up with. So yeah, man, thank you for coming on. That was just my closing thoughts, Rob.
Yeah, thanks so much, Eric. It's been a blast to learn and be Injective filled, as well as modularity and all these concepts that we spoke about. I think it's really cool to highlight some of the components that are out there that are kind of catch and win, and then pull them together so that we can get a more comprehensive understanding. So thank you.
Yeah, really appreciate it. Thank you so much.